Until now, we have been using just one computer to run a process. This is good for processes with a small volume. However, if we have to process a large volume of items within a short period of time, one machine may not be sufficient. This is where Blue Prism's multi-bot architecture comes into place. In this video, we will see a basic overview of multi-bot architecture and how to set it up. Before we go ahead and start the actual setup, let's see how a typical Blue Prism infrastructure looks like in a large enterprise. Currently, we have just one Windows PC, which could be a laptop or a desktop, on which we have installed SQL Server Express and Blue Prism. However, in an enterprise infrastructure, people don't really install SQL Server Express on the local machine unless it's for some testing or demo purpose. Instead, there will be a dedicated database server running SQL Server Standard or Enterprise Edition, and the computers we use for development will only have Blue Prism installed and will not have SQL Server Express. There will be hundreds of such computers with Blue Prism installed, and though technically we can connect all these Blue Prism instances directly to the database, it is not really secure. So we bring in another server, install Blue Prism on that, connect it to the SQL Server, and then enable the Blue Prism server functionality so that all these computers can connect to this Blue Prism server instead of the SQL Server directly. This way, the database server and its information is not exposed to the developers, testers, or whoever is using Blue Prism on those PCs. Now, this server is what we call as a Blue Prism application server. Again, this is a very high-level overview, but in reality, most of the large enterprises don't even install Blue Prism on users' desktop or laptop. Instead, they will have one more server which will run a virtualization software like VMware ESX or Microsoft Hyper-V, which will be hosting multiple virtual desktops. These virtual desktops will run Windows operating system and Blue Prism, and they will connect to the Blue Prism application server. The users will simply take a remote desktop session of these virtual machines to use Blue Prism. When multiple computers with Blue Prism are connected to the same application server, all those machines will show up under available resources in the control room. Alright, now let's see how to simulate or set up a multi-bot infrastructure at your home so that you can practice with it. Most of you might have installed Blue Prism and SQL Server Express on a Windows laptop or desktop that's connected to your home router. Now, if you have a spare laptop or a desktop with Windows, you can install Blue Prism on it and connect it to the same home router, either wired or wireless. This way, both the computers will be on the same network and same IP range, which you can verify by checking their IP address. Alternatively, if your laptop or desktop has a good amount of RAM, like at least 8 GB, you don't need a spare laptop or desktop. You can simply use a virtualization software and create two virtual machines. There are quite a few free virtualization software available in the market, but my favorite one is Oracle VM VirtualBox. I have posted the download link for Oracle VM VirtualBox in the description below, and you can download it from there. Just go ahead and give it a try. I'm also running Blue Prism on a virtual machine. Anyway, so once we have these two computers, we will enable the Blue Prism server component on the first computer which has SQL Server Express installed and make this as the Blue Prism application server. Just because we have enabled the Blue Prism server functionality on this computer doesn't mean that we cannot use this as a Blue Prism client. The server and client are two different components of Blue Prism. So we will connect the Blue Prism clients of both the computers to this Blue Prism server on the first computer, which in turn will be connected to the database on the SQL Server Express, which is again installed on the same first computer. Although this technically works, it is definitely not a good practice to run Blue Prism server and client and the database all on the same computer, and you will hardly see such a setup in real-time environments. We are doing this setup just for training purpose so that we don't have to use more than two computers. Alright, now let's go ahead and start creating the setup. Until now, I have been showing you this computer, which is basically Win7 BP Prod 1. Now I have set up one more machine with Windows 7 and I have named it as Win7 BP Prod 2. You can also see that I have set the overall desktop theme to orange in this computer, so whenever I switch between the two computers, you know which computer I'm on. Basically, computer 1 is all blue and computer 2 is all orange. Okay. Alright, so on this computer I have installed only Blue Prism and not SQL Server Express because we are going to connect this Blue Prism client to the Blue Prism application server on computer 1. So let's see how to do that. Before even we start enabling the server component, we first need to set up something called an encryption scheme, which is primarily to support the credential manager. So if you go to the System tab, under Security, you will see an option called Credentials. This is the credential manager, and it will allow us to store the credentials, basically the username and password of various applications that Blue Prism interacts with. We will see how to use credential manager in detail in a later video. When we add the credentials of various applications, Blue Prism will encrypt these credentials using an encryption scheme, which we need to configure now. So in order to configure the encryption scheme, click on Encryption Scheme, and on the right hand side you will see Credentials Key, Unresolved Key. Click Edit. Here you can leave the name as Credentials Key as it is, and then for the location you have two options, Application Server and Database. We will select the option Database. Then we need to select the encryption method. I will select AES 256 AES Crypto Service, and then I'll click Generate to generate a key, and then click OK. So we are done with setting up the encryption. Now let's go ahead and set up the Blue Prism application server. I will log out of Blue Prism, then open Computer, go to C drive, Program Files, Blue Prism Limited, Blue Prism Automate, and here you should see BP Server. Double click on that, click Yes, and you will get the Blue Prism Server dialog box. Click New, go to the Key Store tab, and here we need to add the same credential scheme that we entered earlier. So I will click New, then type the credential scheme exactly as we gave before, which is credentials key. Select the method as AES 256 AES Crypto Service because that's what we gave earlier. Then click Generate. Now go to the Details tab and leave the name as default. Again, I would like to impress upon this point. Do not change this name. If you change it, then there are some additional steps which we need to do to make this work. The reason is during Blue Prism installation, a new Windows service called Blue Prism Server is registered for this server configuration name, which is default. So what I mean is if you go to services.msc, you see there is a service called Blue Prism Server, and this service is created for a server configuration named default. Now if we change this name, then we need to manually register another service for the new server name. I will show you how to do that in advanced videos. We are not going to do that right now. So for now, let's leave it as default. Then select the database connection as BP connection, leave the port number as 8199, and make sure you uncheck secure connections, because secure connections is used only when all these computers are in an active directory infrastructure, which basically means in a domain. But our computers are in a workgroup, so we will leave it unchecked. Then click OK and click Save Configuration, and your Blue Prism server is ready. Now we can start this service by clicking the Start button, but this is typically used only for testing purpose. In production, it is started by going to Services and starting this service which says Blue Prism Server. Now before we start, there is one more thing we need to do. Right click on Blue Prism Server Service and click Properties. Go to the Logon tab, and here you can see that the logon as is selected as local system account. But if you remember, when we created the Blue Prism database, we selected SQL Server Windows Authentication. Let me show you. So if we go to Blue Prism and click the Configure button, you can see that SQL Server Windows Authentication is selected, which means that Blue Prism Server Service should also use Windows credentials rather than the system account. So I will select this account, click Browse, then type my username, then click Check Names and click OK. Now this username is basically the Windows username. It has nothing to do with Blue Prism. It's a Windows username with which you log in. Alright, now I will enter the password for this account, confirm the password, click apply, and next I'll go to the general tab, change the startup type from manual to automatic, then click apply and OK. Now if I right click and start the service is started and our application server is ready. Now let's connect the Blue Prism client from the computer to this computer. First we will have to make a note of the IP address of this computer. So I will click start, type cmd and hit enter. Then type the command ipconfig and hit enter. So here is the IP address. Let's make a note of that. Now we will go to computer 2 and launch Blue Prism by double clicking. And you will get the error, you must specify connection before Blue Prism can function. Yes, that's exactly what we're going to do now. So click OK, click configure. I'll name the connection as BP server. You can name it anything you want, but I just named it BP server. Then select the connection type as Blue Prism server. And you can see it is not asking for any database related information like it did before, because that's going to be taken care of by the Blue Prism application server which we configured. So type the IP address of the Blue Prism server which we made a note of from computer 1. Then make sure you uncheck use secure connection. As I said earlier, this is only used in an Active Directory infrastructure. Now click test connection and it says connection valid. So click OK and you're ready to log in. Now simply use the same username and password that you used to log into Blue Prism on computer 1. And if I click login, it is successfully signed into Blue Prism. Now if we go to Studio, we can see all those processes and objects we created in computer 1 is appearing here. That's because they both are connected to the same database. Now let's log into Blue Prism client on computer 1 as well. So we will repeat exactly what we did on computer 2. I will click configure. I'll create a new connection and name it as BP server. Select the connection type as Blue Prism server. Enter the IP address, which is basically the IP address of this computer itself. Uncheck secure connection. And then if I click test connection, the connection is valid. So we'll click OK. And I will log in with the username and password. Alright, so we are logged in successfully. So if I go to Studio again, I see all the processes and objects. And if I go to control room, I can see the computers showing, both the computers showing under available resources. If I go to computer 2 and the control room here, I see again both the computers. Now we can simply run this process on both the computers by either dragging and dropping the process into the two computers, or you can select both the computers together and drag and drop these computers into the process. Both the ways it will work. And you can do this from either this computer or computer 1. Doesn't matter. You can do it from any of the computer. I'm not going to do that right now because before we run a process on multiple bots, there are a lot of changes that we need to make to the process diagram so that it is compatible with multi-bot architecture. Alright, so that is it for this video. I hope you got a fair understanding on multi-bot architecture. We will continue further in the next video. Thank you for watching.